I'm Jim Anderton, and this is the Industry Insights and Trends podcast. On this show, we'll explore the length and breadth of 21st century engineering, from civil engineering mega projects to innovation at the quantum level. We speak with subject matter experts and industry watchers from every sector of the engineering discipline.
You know, for decades, the design and manufacturing engineering disciplines have worked within business models that rely on global supply chains. Everything from children's toys to jet airliners depend on outsourced manufacturing and design assets that are distributed among subsidiary corporations and a large network of Tier 1 and Tier 2 vendors. 4 months into the second Trump administration, however, and the supply chains feeding American manufacturers are in crisis. Reshoring has been an ongoing trend for years, but will tariffs accelerate that trend? Can American design and engineering firms backfill the supply chain with domestic sources? And if so, how quickly? Joining me are two guests with a unique insight into global trends in those manufacturing supply chains. Paul Heney, Vice President and Editorial Director for the WTWH Media Engineering Portfolio, and Mary Gannon, Editor-in-Chief of Fluid Power World. Paul and Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
It is you are both media professionals who work in industrial media, and you have a unique insight, I think, into these supply chains and these issues, in that you talk to many people that do the things that enable the machines that make the consumer goods in the end. So in a sense, you're sort of like the key cog in the machine, if you will. Paul, can I start with you? Of the companies that you work with, have any of them talked actively about how those tariffs are going to impact them?
We've definitely seen companies that are sending out press releases all around tariffs. There was one. I'll not name them here, but they sent out a release to their customers and included the media on it, and they mentioned that they were raising their prices. I forget what, maybe 15%. But then on top of that, they said anything that they deal with that comes through or goes through China was going up, more than 100%. So the tariffs are going to be felt definitely by manufacturing consumers, let's say, the folks that are buying the pieces, parts that go into an excavator or an airplane or packaging machinery, and those are going to be passed on down the line. I think the other impact that we're seeing is that there's just such uncertainty, right? I mean, we've had all these different back and forths and starts and stops, and we can talk more later on about kind of the reshoring and the producing local for local. But one thing that's not going to help get more folks investing in the United States is uncertainty. When you are planning out a manufacturing plant, you want to know what you're getting into. You want to know what your costs are going to be. You want to know all of this well before you put shovels in the ground. So I think this uncertainty is really hurting us.
To add to that a little bit, Jim, is, I've talked to different industry associations, different companies, and it's kind of it depends. Companies that are heavily import driven, that are like distributors or system integrators, they're putting a line item on their pricing so that if the tariffs change, they can quickly take that price increase off. And one thing that I've seen is that in the fluid power space, it seems to be affecting the mobile hydraulics market a lot more than the industrial or the pneumatics market. So we're talking machines that move on the roads and the fields versus those machines that are making our factories run. I'm not really sure why the difference is there, but even anecdotally talking to companies down at the Offshore Technology Conference, people down there, which again, that's that industrial hydraulic space. It's technologies that are not on moving equipment. They don't seem to be quite affected by the tariffs, whereas the mobile hydraulics is down almost 20% in shipments so far this year, which is kind of unexpected. So it's just a sort of a question of what's happening and how uncertain are we all really going to be right now.
Yeah, and building off that a little bit, Mary, I think companies that have, let's say, a global presence with facilities in the U.S. as well as maybe some other countries like the UKs, the Australias, the Germanys of the world, are probably going to be the ones that are best positioned to better manage these supply chain challenges that we're seeing with the uncertainty around tariffs. I saw a release just the other day from an aerospace company Gauzy, I believe they're called. They have a location in Florida, and they serve the U.S. aeronautics industry, but then strategic locations elsewhere, like in Europe, Australia, like I said earlier. So if a company like that has facilities that are each well equipped to manufacture for their own regions, then I think that they'll probably be on a little more secure footing if you have more of that globally dispersed supply chain. And like I said, it's that old local for local production that we've heard so much about the last decade.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny. The For years we assumed that diversifying your supply chain is that moving it, outsourcing it, moving it around the world. In fact, that was a risk minimizing strategy. Now it looks like the opposite. It appears to be that when you globalize or outsource your supply chain, now you're really wide open to incredible risk. I mean, are you hearing concern about this instability, sort of just from almost a political standpoint? I mean, do you know where you stand? Whether you're dealing with suppliers that you've invested a considerable amount of time and money with.
I will say, having talked to the NFPA recently, and just kind of seeing how things have been going since COVID, there's been a lot of movement to reshore or nearshore towards the United States. Most of that has been in Mexico, but I was told recently that there has been a lot of European manufacturers that are exploring membership in the NFPA and looking into getting more manufacturing over here, because most of the companies that are over there already have some sort of a presence here, but usually it's just distribution. But if they can get some sort of manufacturing, I think it would make a big difference to how they operate in a global way. Instead of just operating in Germany, for example, if they can have manufacturing in middle of America, I think that's something they are looking into, which is interesting.
Paul, you've traveled to Europe recently. Can you tell me, is there something unique going on over there? Is there a change in attitudes? Is What's the feeling in Europe?
Well, my gosh, just since November, I think I've been to 7 countries on four continents: Portugal, Germany, France, Turkey, South Africa, and then also throw in there Canada and Mexico. It's been pretty surprising as someone who travels a lot, just how perceptions of Americans has turned pretty negative. I've been constantly approached by people. I think they're just trying to understand, what's happening in our country, why we're going down this route, and I don't have an easy answer myself. Um, I had an economist a couple weeks ago in South Africa come up to me, and she said, with the first Trump administration, we were all a little bemused. So many nations in that region of the world have had to go through their periods of what she called really corrupt leaders. And she said it was a bit of Schadenfreude to see that us all going through it. But she said this time, this administration, it's affecting everyone, not just us. Beyond manufacturing, I think there's going to be a lot of impact just on travel, and obviously you can go into. We've read lots about consumer travel, right? Are the Canadians, are the Europeans going to come to Florida? Are they going to come to Nevada? Are they going to come to Arizona? The snowbirds. But I heard a lot of buzz there too about business travel. There are a lot of corporate people who are very reluctant to come to the U.S. right now. They're people have asked me. They said that we're scared about being held up or detained at the border. I mean, even if we don't do anything, we just hear these horror stories. So whether it's real or not, there's definitely a perception out there that I think is going to affect travel both on the consumer side and on the business side.
Yeah, yeah. We hear a lot about IP, and one of the issues I'm hearing a lot about digital transformation, of course, is that with cloud-based engineering, distributed design methodologies to global players around the world, how do you protect your IP? This has been an issue with some Asian countries forever. Mary, are you hearing anything on that side about security? I mean, I know we live in a world now where especially for firms that are doing ITAR regulated contracts or things that may involve the Defense Department, it's always been an issue, but now it's got to be on steroids.
I'm sure it is, especially like you said, in those digital designs and with machines that are going to be more autonomous and things like that, where you're going to have more secure systems. Fluid power, though, we have a lot of designs that almost anybody can make. And that's always been a problem, because they would go to a trade show, they would take a picture of a pump, and they would reverse engineer it. So you definitely do see companies being a lot more cautious about what they're sharing on like trade show floors, for example, so that people cannot reverse engineer. Um, and especially with those more advanced designs, which are going to have the electronics inside as well as the heavy duty durable hydraulics. So I think it's a concern. I haven't really talked to anyone about that quite yet, but I bet it's definitely coming, especially as we're in this uncertain phase in our global landscape right now.
That from a technology standpoint too, we recently had the Rapid and TCT shows in Detroit, and I definitely heard from some folks who went to that, who were talking about how much additive manufacturing is really embedding itself in different industries, and that is helping just domestically here. It's helping push efficiencies, it's driving innovative designs, and it's helping in its own way of keeping supply chains a little more resilient.
Yeah, well, Paul, that is strongly suggestive of that logical question of how fast can American suppliers take up the slack? Are you hearing anything about increasing order volumes or an increasing pressure to come to market faster?
I have talked to some companies, and so on the economic stage, 2025 was supposed to be a good rebound year for the fluid power market. And it kind of was slow to start, I think, because there was so much uncertainty. But I have talked to a lot of companies, and they are kind of really doing very well right now. Like I said, other than that mobile hydraulics, there is really strong sales and shipments happening. So I do think that nationally, our companies are poised for success. They are in a growth mode, and I really can't say if that's anything to do with the fact that we people want to buy locally produced, you know, components. But I have talked to a couple manufacturers, and they have always been one of those companies that have said, proudly manufactured in the USA. I know that the couple of these companies I've talked to, they do not have any outside manufacturing outside the US, and their numbers are definitely up. They do not have much impact from the tariffs yet. So I do think that companies that can step up domestic production are probably going to have a good win this year.
I think one of the issues is that you can't turn around that reshoring very quickly. I mean, there are individual companies that can, but Kearney, which is the global strategy and management consultancy, just put out its 2025 reshoring index, which was actually just conducted in March, and it declined by what they're calling, quote, a massive 311 points, which they say is really a reality check on U.S. manufacturing readiness. A quote that I think kind of summarized their report was this. They said, "This report reveals a hard truth. While CEOs are more committed than ever to reshoring, the U.S. domestic manufacturing ecosystem is still playing catch up. The next phase will require not just capital, but coordination."
Now, that's an interesting quote. Is that one wonders what they quite mean by coordination. Capital, of course, is always an issue down here, and that leads me to ask you, Mary. A large manufacturer in the agricultural equipment sector, who of course is a big user of hydraulics, manufacture a lot of their equipment in Mexico, and had plans to continue to manufacture more of it in Mexico. And they ran afoul of Trump personally, not just the Trump administration. And it's widely believed that specific firms will get exemptions where necessary to make sure that sort of equipment gets built. Do you think that's the way we're going to see this thing evolve over the next few months?
That'll be interesting to see. I think there's going to probably be some play like that because, like I said, I know several major fluid power and even some motion control companies on the more, automation industrial side that have reshored their efforts into Mexico. I feel like several times a year I'm getting announcements about major plants being produced over there. So that was their answer to getting their technologies closer to the North American market. So hopefully that will be the case so that they can, produce those cylinders, those hoses, those cables, those valves that are going to go into those machines. Because if people are pulling back on machinery production already, it could be a serious issue, in a year or two if they're still not buying new machines.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep hearing about infrastructure. From an infrastructure perspective, of course, we hear a lot about highways and bridges. You're behind on maintenance. tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars are going to be needed to rebuild the infrastructure to support the new boost in manufacturing capabilities. There's going to be a lot of goods moving within the United States. Does that play into the fluid power world, do you think, Mary?
Absolutely. I mean, fluid power moves the world, really. I mean, you can't drive on a road that wasn't touched by hydraulics. So for sure, there's a lot of opportunity in the fluid power market. And Paul and I have been to going to these economic events at industry associations for years, and these economic experts have always said, the US is the biggest economy in the world, and we definitely can fail, but it's going to take something huge. And I kind of feel like fluid power is that way as well. We go into so many machines and so much technology that even though there is a lot of uncertainty, there is lots of opportunity for growth in the fluid power market in the coming year or so as these big infrastructure projects hopefully take place because our country really needs those.
And Mary, talking about some of those speakers, Alan Bolio, who I know we both love, the very well respected manufacturing economist, he was just saying at the A3 Business Forum a few months ago, reminding everyone, he was saying, tariffs do not work. He noted that in fiscal 2024, the dollar amount that came in through tariffs was 74 billion, while the federal government spent 7.4 trillion. So, his comments were tariffs are not going to save the economy, they're not going to save the federal budget, and they're not going to save the deficit.
All right, Paul, one of the highest profile corporations, of course, we think of in this area is Boeing. And Boeing is a case in point. Boeing manufactures largely made in America aircraft. They also manufacture the 787, which was designed from the outset to be essentially entirely outsourced. Every major assembly of the aircraft is made someplace else, and those assemblies are brought together, and then Boeing's become a final assembler of that aircraft. And the industry has been looking at that for several years and wondering, is that the way forward for future aircraft manufacturing? With this new tariff regime at this point, that may not be possible anymore. And in fact, in some ways, the other way around, we're seeing Airbus doing some significant assembly processes in the United States. Do you think project like the 787, is that dead in the water, or are we going to find a way to sort of work a way around the tariff difficulties?
I think Boeing is going to find a way to work around. The industry is going to find a way to work around, and again, whether that means pressure on the Trump administration, none of these we've learned in the last couple weeks and months. None of these tariffs and different policies necessarily stick. It's kind of the flavor of the week. So I just think we have too much invested in aerospace as a country to let this new way of manufacturing that Boeing has been working on for the last decade or two crumble. So something's going to happen. Something's going to have to break.
On the aerospace side, also, we have, of course, the certification of COMAX C919 and what is expected to be a new wave of Chinese built civilian airliners, which contain a significant amount of American content and European content in them. So its tariffs could work one way or the other. It could create a new market theoretically for the Chinese manufacturers to break into the global civilian airliner market, or it could hobble them at the same time. So are these negotiations going on right now? And we hear there's a deal that may not be a deal. Is China US, is that the key to this tariff world? Is it all about that bilateral relationship, do you think, Paul?
I think it's one of the key ones. If any of you listen to Peter Zion, the geopolitical strategist, he's talking a lot about how the demographics of China is almost going to be an imploding bomb. And even though they stopped the one-child policy back in, gosh, what was it, 2005, it was too late. And even if you believe the numbers that the Chinese government puts out as far as population numbers, they're in trouble. In another 10, 15, 20 years, their population is going to plummet. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I don't have the answer, but I am not personally as worried about China as some are. I think they have a lot of structural problems in their society right now that aren't talked about a lot.
I'd like to add real quick just something that I kind of learned about recently too, and didn't learn about it, but just kind of got it pointed out to me. In the fluid power space, there isn't that much relationship with China. Obviously, there's some manufacturing there, but because of those IP issues you've mentioned in the past, China is not the biggest concern. I think a lot of the UK and the Euro tariffs are causing more concern in our industry than China is right now, which is fascinating. But I guess that means that they probably aren't really sourcing as much material from China as they used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary and Paul, so much to talk about. It's an ongoing crisis, and it's unfolding as we speak right now. Last question, Mary, do you anticipate the 6 months or a year from now, are we going to be having this conversation? Is this something where there will have to be a resolution just out of common sense, out of industrial necessity?
I mean, I would hope so, out of common sense and necessity, that we would have a resolution. But I think right now, you know, we're in this weird tug of war and everything is so uncertain. And I feel like we're going to kind of keep going that way for quite a while with this administration. So I really don't expect too much to change, but I hope that we will start seeing some more resolutions coming day by day. But I can't hold out that I believe it's really going to happen right away.
Paul?
Our sister publication, Plant Engineering, just completed a study, Jim, in fact, last week, on the impacts of tariffs on U.S. manufacturing. And one thing that I thought was interesting there is that 2/3 of respondents reported that their organizations have been directly affected by tariffs or import duties over the past year. And so I just go back to the fact that there's going to be pressure back on this administration. The more people are hurting in the industrial space, there's going to be a lot of pushback. So I hope, fingers crossed, that 6 months from now, let's say the back and forth drama has lessened.
So much to talk about. I think we're going to be having this conversation again soon, and perhaps more than once. Paul Heney, Mary Gannon, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Jim.
Always a pleasure, Jim. Thank you.
That's it for today's Industry Insights and Trends podcast, brought to you by engineering.com. If you like this program and want to keep pace with the latest innovations in engineering, subscribe to our newsletters such as Design Weekly, 3D printing, aerospace and defense, digital transformation, simulation, or a weekly roundup at engineering.com/subscribe. For our deeper engineering series, visit engineering.com TV for exclusive shows like Designing the Future, Manufacturing the Future, and the Engineering Roundtable, found exclusively on engineering.com TV. Thanks for tuning in.